I'm Mike,
And I'm Amber. Welcome to the Covenant Chronicles,
where we tell you the truth about relationships.
giving you the tools to build the foundation you always needed. Welcome back to the Covenant Chronicles.
That one doesn't stretch far enough.
We're talking about blankets because apparently he wanted to go get a blanket before we started this, but I just kind of started it like normal.
Is what it is now.
You can share your...
No. It's fine. I'll just freeze. I'll just share with the dog over here, I guess.
Yeah, you
He's
can
got
use
his own
Remy's
blanket. I'm just over here freezing. Dog's got a blanket. You got a blanket. So you want to talk about financial disagreements. I think this is a fun topic, and I have a very simple solution to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, but before we go into that, I want to get your opinions and get your thoughts about financial disagreement.
Okay.
And why do you think it's such a hot topic for couples?
Ugh. I don't know. Finances in general are just such a rough topic for most relationships. And I think partly it just hits a lot of people's insecurities talking about money. Because we end up feeling attacked by our partner when talking about finances. And, if one of you is like a spender and the other is a saver, then, the saver might make the spender feel like they're ridiculous for spending a whole bunch of money. Or, it could be the opposite where the spender's like, why do we have to save all the time? And then it just becomes this like battle between partners instead of trying to come together as a team to figure out finances. And the hard thing is, I think that most people spend an eternity in that battle and never actually figure out how to communicate effectively about that scenario.
Yeah. I think it goes deeper than just the relationship, though. I believe finances is a hot topic for a lot of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because think about it, like you show up at church, they talk about money, everybody gets weird, right? Your friend talks to you about money, whether they're expressing the amount of money they do or don't have, either direction they go with that conversation, you feel weird. Somebody talks to you about your money, your financial situation, you feel weird. I believe there's this weirdness that comes along with it, and this weirdness that society has imposed on it. And, as believers, obviously, that's a challenge for us because we're taught to not idolize it, right?
Yeah.
But, and if you want to go down that rabbit hole, I mean, there's literally a financial plan in the Bible. Like if you're a believer and you read, it's all there, right?
Yeah.
Tithe 10%. And I'm not going to get into the debate of what tithing actually means, but it does say your first fruits. That's not after your bills are paid and, everything else is paid. It's the first. The next 20% gets put away for the drought, right? And then everything else comes after that. However, when relationships struggle with this, I think there's a big how would I say it, catalyst for these events and these disagreements. And part of that it stems from, in my opinion, the lack of communication around money, right? When you said you wanted to talk about this and you had said, well, we handle it better than most, but we still disagree from time to time. I instantly went to, the only disagreements we really have is lack of communication, right? It's not that we disagree with how to necessarily manage money. And there is a certain extent of that inside of relationships, but more often than not, if you've been in a long-term relationship or you're married, either one, all the signs were there from the very beginning that you guys are on completely different wavelengths when it comes to money, and
Yeah.
you chose to ignore those, right? Or two,
Been there,
they're
done that.
right. The you actually are not as far apart as you think you are. However, because of the constant, I guess, disagreement, if you will, you tend to drive this divide, and the divide is in the communication. It's not in the typical story or the stereotypical story that you hear of, oh yeah, my wife loves spending money. Oh, da 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 da, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one, we've talked about this before. If you're leading properly, like she's not just going to go out and do whatever. And this applies to everything, right? And as in the relationship. But the other, catalyst there is, and probably a lot of people are going to hate when I say this, a lack of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you shouldn't idolize it. But if you as a man are just coasting and you're not handling what you need to handle and you're not handling the household, that is one security area that most women seek. Whether you agree with it or not, facts are facts,
Yeah.
right? And so a lot of these disagreements stem from either lack of money, which if you're handling your stuff, not saying there won't ever be a period, because even on your journey and as you're getting to where you're going, there's going to be ups and downs to get there, right? But there's also a difference, and your wife is going to see right through it, or your spouse is going to see right through it when you're just coasting and not actually trying to solve the problem, or it's just a season you're going through. That being said, the communication is the biggest part, right? We had a disagreement recently stem from money.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest thing that we nailed down was, well, you didn't communicate with me about something you were doing, and I didn't communicate until after the fact about something I was doing. And they were both kind of major purchases. And we, you know, came at opposing sides of the fence on this. But when I stepped back and I analyzed the situation, it all stemmed from communication, right?
Yeah.
Which is exactly what I said is, okay, well, this is simple. The solution is communicate, right? We have a system that we use for budgeting. We have a system that we use, or supposed to be using, I should say, for tracking our finances. We both have logins. We're both, on the same thing. So, okay, it's on me for not leading the fact of communicating properly, right? We started to disagree, but I stopped that and said, hey, that's on me. I'll take ownership for this side of it. And, we're not communicating, but I'm not being a great example of how to communicate when it comes to our finances. So I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix our system. I'm going to dial it in. I'm going to communicate with you about it. And then we both can track things, see exactly where everything's at, and we can have an open conversation about things.
Well, I do kind of want to backtrack a little bit because we're kind of coming at this in a good place in each of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
But I think often when there is financial disagreements and issues commonly in a relationship, it stems from there being things that need to be worked on within each partner.
Mm-hmm.
Also, let's take for example, like I'll be completely honest, there was a time period in my life where I did buy things to fill a void.
Mhm.
I bought things to make myself feel something, feel happiness, feel excitement, feel whatever it was in that moment. I felt like buying things made me feel that.
Mhm.
And so I did struggle with the finance side. And, when my ex would come to me about that, it was always an issue because I felt like he was attacking me, right?
Mhm.
I wasn't taking ownership for the things that I was doing in that scenario that was, causing a problem. So I do think there is a level of needing to evaluate where you're at and figure out if you are contributing things that do make disagreements in your finances a constant issue. You
Mhm.
know, are you spending money to feel stuff? Are you buying things to make yourself feel happy? Are you buying things to fill a void that you don't want to acknowledge? You know, are you I guess the reverse could probably be true too, saving a bunch of money because you're afraid of things,
Mhm.
um, afraid to spend money because, something bad's gonna happen. Like, I think it can go both ways,
Yeah.
but I think that does like, I do think that it needs to be acknowledged within yourself, and you need to come to a place of figuring out, am I contributing to this problem? Because before I think you can start communicating effectively about it, I think you have to actually be aware of those things and be at a point of accepting it within yourself to be able to move forward.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
I had an interesting thought in all of this while you were speaking, and it's a little off topic, but it's funny how when you are in a relationship, in an unhealthy relationship, and you're not in a healthy mental state or anything, you're there will be this like natural, you want to blame the other person, right?
Mhm.
And then when you get to a different place, your mindset shifts, right? And it's this opposite effect of like, you and I almost, if we have a disagreement, it may start going, that direction a little bit, but we quickly round it up and step back. And then it almost becomes the opposite of like over accountability on each other's parts, and it just, it tripped my mind because I was thinking about when you were describing your past. And, for me, I mean, I'm very hard on men because, we are supposed to be the leaders of the relationship. So for me, my mind instantly went to, yeah, that may be true, but hiding all the finances and giving you a bunch of credit cards and just being like, oh, do whatever, and then getting mad at you for spending and never actually doing anything about it or having a conversation and just yelling and hiding all the finances, like, isn't the way to handle that either. Right. And so, like, in my mind, I'm like, well, there was an issue and like it wasn't handled and it's on the man to handle it. But it's just an interesting that, little side note there of the shift in mindset from a lot of people's relationships and where they're at, of constantly wanting to blame the other person, to shifting to the internal of like, okay, well, you know, how are you acting? What are you doing in your part in that? Right. And
Mhm.
like the same thing for you is like, we come from a place of like, you're asking, okay, women, what is your part in this?
Mhm.
right? And I'm asking men, what is your part in this?
Yeah.
Which is a complete role reversal. You think of a unhealthy relationship in which we tend to blame the other partner for
Mhm.
our issues.
Oh, for sure. But I think like when you're in that unhealthy cycle and mindset, that's just if you don't ever break the cycle or stop the cycle and say, hey, maybe I am contributing something to this, maybe there is an issue here that I need to look at, then you're going to continue having these problems forever. Because that is how our brains work. Like, if you keep feeding it the same information, the same thing's going to come out, right? And you're just going to be stuck in a continuous loop of unhealthy discussions about your finances.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the part that isn't often acknowledged. And people are like, oh, well, just tell me what to do and I'll make it all better. Well, first, you need to evaluate what's actually happening, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point of this, right? Is like, how do you analyze, or I guess, how to handle these disagreements around finances, right? Because it's like really easy for us to say that, well, you shouldn't be disagreeing, but it's, and many people probably argue about finances and they want to get out of that cycle, right? So then, like you said, the key is, okay, well, analyze what's actually going on. And I think a big part of this is stop worrying about what the other person is doing and analyze what you are doing internally,
Mhm.
right? Because what is your, and it really stems back to communication and connection,
Mhm.
right? Because what is your level of communication around finances? Now, this isn't to say that there hasn't been things in your past that have made you feel like maybe you can't communicate or you struggle to communicate or whatever the case may be, right?
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, that is going to be the basis and the foundation of what's going on. You
Mhm.
can try to treat the symptoms all you want, but if you don't get to the root cause of what's going on, you're just going to keep having symptoms,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, what is your involvement in this? What are you doing? What is your part in this personally regarding these disagreements about money? And analyze what your actual disagreement is,
Mhm.
right? Because more often than not, say for example, you have this disagreement, right? And I'll just use a common one. She spent too much money. Well, she went out, your wife went out and bought something. It was expensive. It was, a big chunk of money for whatever your financial situation is, right? Because that can vary, right? The one thing to understand is money is not finite and it's all perspective. What $500 may be a lot of money to some person, and that might be a drop in the bucket to another, right?
Mhm.
So whatever that amount is, let's just say your wife went out and spent a decent chunk of money, and you had budgeted or you had planned to use wherever this money was at. Say it's in your checking account, your normal bills checking account, and you intended to use it for something else. And now you had to, transfer around, or maybe you don't know how you're going to cover it, or whatever the case may be. And now you're upset. And you get mad at her for spending money. And then there's this argument that ensues. And then it sounds something to the effect of, you know, you being controlling or you doing X, Y, and Z. And you fire back with, well, you always spend too much money. You have a money spending problem, da, 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 da. Okay. Well, let's break those things down. Did you communicate, hey, babe, there's X amount of money in our checking account right now. this is slotted for this.
Mm-hmm.
We need to not touch the account right now.
Yeah.
And maybe she was like, oh, well, I really wanted to go do whatever or get this. Okay, can I wait till next week? Blah, blah, blah. My paycheck hits Friday and this, that, and the other. Or, hey, no problem. Let me get you the money, or whatever the case may be, right? Whatever the solution looks like, because once again, it's going to depend on your house.
Yeah.
It's going to depend on your financial situation, right? But is that little bit of communication can be vastly different, right? And then let's look on the flip side of things. Not saying that, in this scenario, she is your child and she has to have permission for everything. But if she just says, hey, I was going to go do this, just wanted to let you know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then he can either plan for it or he can say, well, hey, actually this money was slotted for da 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 da. Hold off. Let me get you cash. Use this other card.
Yeah.
We need to wait. Whatever the case may be, right? But both sides, if you really look at it, either partner could have communicated and totally changed the outcome of that situation.
Yeah.
But instead, nobody communicates up front. You have a disagreement, and then you're standing here going, man, I'm tired of fighting about money.
Right.
Well, if you're tired of it, change your actions.
Well, yeah. Like both of you need to evaluate if you have a part in it. But also, like, I do think people probably spend a ridiculous amount of time being like, we need a budget. Let's sit down and budget, and then never actually doing it. Right. And you'll get into these disagreements and arguments and then be like, well, we need to sit down and make a budget. And then a year goes by and that never happens. And you fight 20 more times about the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it's important to you, then do it and figure out how to start communicating about it in a healthy way. I just personally feel like when you start taking accountability for yourself and your own actions, that's going to make a significant difference in how you show up and communicate about these things in general. And I think that's probably a big place to start. But if something is important to you, if you're mad because too much money is being spent, then you do need to prioritize actually doing something about it. But I'll say, like you talked about earlier, like we had a disagreement the other day about money, and it is funny because like I don't actually think either of us were actually upset about the money part of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was just our lack of communication about other things that were going on. And it wasn't like we had this disagreement and then it lasted for the next 2 days because we were so mad at each other for whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a couple hours into it, I like sent you a message and was like, I'm really sorry, can we figure this out together? And because we don't like typically let things go on for very long.
Well, I think an important caveat to that too is like, it wasn't like we sat there like ignoring each other for 2 hours either, right? I mean, we had this disagreement kind of right in the middle of us doing 100 other things. We were planning for something we had to put together that we were hosting that night. We were trying to get kids picked up from school. We were trying to do all this other stuff. And, at the end of the day, it was just this kind of like we were just doing things and trying to take care of things. And, it did take a little bit of time before we had a few seconds to say, hey, let me actually, say something without my emotions being heightened, and let's have a conversation about this because, I do want to fix this.
Yeah.
right? But that's the key to this is, like you said, we were more upset about the lack of communication about stuff than it was money. But for somebody that hasn't gotten there necessarily or gotten to that point of understanding in their relationship or even about themselves, it's going to be this argument about, or this justification of, well, we always argue about money.
Mm-hmm.
But are you? Or is it the lack of communication?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then, well, let's take it a step further, because one thing I've heard before is, well, I've sat down with my wife and I've made budgets. She doesn't ever seem to stick to it.
Mm.
Okay. And, you know, in those situations, my challenge for that person would be, well, did you have a conversation or did you tell her what she's going to do?
Yeah.
Right.
We've had this conversation several times recently. Like,
Uh-huh.
I think it's just human nature that if you tell someone not to do something, their automatic reaction is, oh, well, I'm going to do that thing.
Right. Well, and that's the whole thing about it, right? Is it, in my honest opinion, my whole thing about it is make more money, right? Like if you're having to put these restrictions on your wife, you should probably make more money. But that being said, you also need to be a team. And, you know, in those situations when it's like, well, you know, I sat down and I did a budget. Okay, but did you actually take into account what her wants and what her feelings are?
Yeah.
Right? Because, like, in your mind, you know, let's use savings as an example. Well, in your mind, you want to have a certain savings. And for you, you feel secure and like you're taking care of the family when you have a certain savings,
Mm-hmm.
right? Most of the time for women, if the bills are paid, they could care less, right? And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying whether you should or shouldn't, but at the end of the day, if the bills are paid, they could kind of care less about the savings in most scenarios, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, if the bills are paid, in her mind, she should be able to go get her Starbucks or what, you know, whatever the
Yeah.
case may be, right? Her whatever drink or this or that. And, you know, with that, you know, you have to have a conversation and say, well, what is it that you want to do? Right. And ask her what she wants to do. Well, I want to do this. I want to go on a vacation. I want to get my hair done. I want to blah, blah, blah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So are you working that into the budget or are you just super worried about paying your bills and then stacking up your savings to, you know, make sure you have 12 to 18 months worth of savings and, you know, or maybe you can't even do that. Maybe you're budgeting for, you know, paycheck to paycheck and you're sitting here telling her, well, you know, da 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 da.
Mm-hmm.
My challenge is you should probably make more money then, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing. There will always be an excuse, you know, and not to be, I guess, too vulgar, but like my grandparents always say, excuses are like assholes. Everybody's got one, right? And so here's the thing. If everybody is at a certain stage in their life and if, you know, one of you is going to school and you're having to budget for certain things because of that, okay, you have to prioritize that. If, you know, one of you is chasing something and it's tight right now because of that, okay, you have to prioritize that. But if you both are in careers, you're not going to school, you're not chasing anything specific, and you're living this kind of contentment, like, and you're just coasting, she's not going to be attracted to that. And I'm not saying you have to make money to be attractive. What I am saying is that you have to be chasing something and chasing who you're supposed to be. And regardless of what that looks like, usually security follows.
Yeah.
And so, in these times of disagreement, analyze, are you actually upset about money, or is it disconnection?
Mm-hmm.
Is it the lack of communication? Is it something within yourself that maybe you're upset that you know that you're not operating at your true potential, or
Mm-hmm.
you're not operating in a way that you should be?
Mm-hmm.
And now you're upset at yourself and you don't want to look yourself in the mirror. Instead, you rather argue with your partner, tell them that they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
how often do we do that?
I think that's a majority of the time.
Right.
Yeah. I just think that in general, if you're coming at it together as a team, you want to build a budget. Okay, we'll sit down and discuss all of these things together. It's not a one-sided thing. It's not uh, all what the wife wants. It's all not all what the husband wants. Like you two are supposed to be working together to figure out your finances and the best way to handle them. And, you know, biblically speaking, like God should be included in that. You should be praying about these things together. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're not praying about it together, well, that might be a place to start too.
Mm-hmm.
um, because it is an incredibly important part, you know. Like I feel like, you know, for us, it's not our money, it's God's money, and how he wants us to handle the finances, we need to figure that out, right? And that's very much the way that we see it. And you know, praying about it is an important piece for us, but also communicating with each other and talking about the things that are important to us and, you know, the things that maybe we feel like we're being, you know, led to do or whatever the case may be. Like we discuss it together and talk about those things.
Mm-hmm.
And truthfully, like neither of us just really frivolously, goodness, I couldn't get that out. Spend money, you know, like we really don't. You most of the time have to like tell me I actually need to go get things because I just don't typically don't like to go spend the money.
Yeah, I think we need to do a podcast on self-care, to be honest with you. And that should be one right there. Because here's the thing. If your woman doesn't have a level of self-care, guys, you should be making that happen. And I'm pretty picky about it. And I'm like, nah, you're going to get your hair done. You're going to get your nails done. And, you know, some guys will say certain things. Some women will say certain things about that. I really don't care what your opinion is. That is something that I enjoy. I think it is something that makes you feel good. I like looking at the pretty sparkly nails. I like it when you get your hair done. You enjoy it. And so that's just been something that we've written into like, hey, we're going to make it happen, right? And there's other things that's part of self-care that like this is part of what is going to happen on a regular basis. This is not an option, right? And you know, there's been times in my life, right? But I've always been like that. That isn't something new. I didn't start doing that with you. I've always been like that. And there's been times in my life that, well, couldn't really afford it, but I figured it out.
Yeah.
Right? Oh crap! You got a nail appointment in a couple days, and I got whoo. Okay, I will pull something out of my butt, and that is why, you know, when I talk about these things, I don't talk about them from a place of like make believe, right? Or somebody's gonna say, "Oh, well, you don't understand my situation." You'd be surprised what I understand because I've been there,
Yeah, I
right?
think we both have.
And that's where like when I say these things and I'm like, you know, you really don't have an excuse. Like if you're just coasting, there is no excuse. knowledge is so easily attainable nowadays. And to make an excuse and be like, oh, well, I don't want to do this, or I can't do this because of X, Y, and Z, you're just making excuses.
Well, and if we want to go back to the biblical stuff, like it literally says, like Jesus, God wants to like steward his money through you. But if you're not actually like proving that you can handle the money, you're not going to be given those opportunities.
Yeah.
You're just sitting around making excuses like, well, it's kind of on you.
So, question is, how do they deal with disagreements and money?
Okay, well, at the beginning, you said you had I know how I can fix this.
Yeah, communicate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Man, put your big boy pants on. Communicate with your wife. It's pretty simple, right? Like, I mean, let's be honest. It's probably going to solve it. And when I say communicate, that doesn't mean tell her what she's going to do.
Well,
That doesn't
yeah,
mean,
that's the
hey,
problem.
this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice. That is, hey, I care about us and I care about our future. So let's sit down and have a conversation because I would love for you to be a part of this. I would love for us to be a team. And if you haven't done it well in the past, hey, I would love for us to be a team. And I know we haven't done this well in the past. And I'm not saying that we're going to get it perfect right now, but I want to try. And if we can't agree on everything, then we're going to pray about it and we're going to come back to it.
Yeah. Yeah, actually being open and making everyone feel safe about the conversation is a really great way to start, because if you haven't had great communication about it in the past, I can promise you walls are going to be up about the conversation in the first place. So, just making it a safe environment where you can both talk and we're not going to argue, we're not going to judge, we're just going to openly talk with each other. It's a great place to start. But also being open and honest with yourself about your own place in the finances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
it's pretty simple. I don't feel that it's that complicated. I don't know, maybe it is, but at the end of the day, be honest with yourself and communicate.
I mean, I think it's hard. Like both of us have been in relationships where it wasn't the best topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But doing work on ourselves and also making it a priority in our relationship to be a team and work at things together has made a vast difference in how we communicate about everything, but finances included.
Yeah, I agree. On that note, we have some stuff to talk about. So they're going to go communicate, and so are we.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we? Okay.
All right. Till next time, guys.
All right. Bye.